Thanks for watching the show. If you like what you see, consider subscribing, commenting, and maybe even becoming a patron. Even just $1 goes a long way. What do you love about your favorite games? What makes them favorites, even? Is it just the gameplay, or is it something deeper than that? For me, I know a game is one of my favorites when it leaves me thinking, whether about its story, its characters, its themes, its mechanics, or simply just its atmosphere. And what I'd consider the best of the best either do most or all of those things. The game we're talking about today is one of those games for me. As a bit of history, I've been a Halo fan for about 14 years now, which while not as long as other fans, is still a significant amount of time I've dedicated to this series. And there's one Halo game I put above the rest, above what a lot of people would consider the series at its peak. A game that changed how I looked at this art form, a game that made me realize that games are an art form, a game that solidified games being my favorite art form. Halo 3 ODST. I have so much to say about this game, and I could do a plot synopsis like I usually would, but for the purpose of this video, I don't think it's where we should start, and I don't think it really matters either. ODST's story isn't very complicated. That's not to say it's shallow, just simple, and there's nothing wrong with that. So given that I think the story isn't necessarily what makes this game special, I'd say it'd be a lot more fitting to go over ODST's cast of characters instead. And that should help us fill in some of the missing pieces of the plot, as well as other topics like gameplay. So let's get this underway with who I think it's very clear is ODST's main character, Buck. While you don't play as Buck as much as the main playable character, the Rookie, it's easy to see in spite of that he still gets the most attention in the narrative. For one, he's the only character that really goes through any kind of arc. After the intro of the game, where every member of Alpha 9, the group of ODST you play as, are split up, Buck really couldn't care less about the original mission anymore. All he really cares about is getting his team back together and getting them safely out of the city. Eventually though, Buck goes back, for the love of his life, Dare, a character we'll get more into in just a bit, and subsequently after catching up with her, helps her finish the mission that the team was sent out for in the first place. Not the deepest character arc for sure, and I would say Buck doesn't really change much over the course of this story either, but it's still more than most of the other characters get. Out of everyone, besides Dare, Buck also takes things the most seriously. In general, he's a lot more stern and sober than his squad mates, which makes sense being the highest ranking member and also being team leader. That's not to say he can't be sarcastic or crack jokes when the time calls for it though, he's generally just less lighthearted than his fellow ODST.
My hatch won't open. How about yours?
Works great.
Given the circumstances and his history with the Fall of Reach, which we won't be getting into in this video because that's its own can of worms, it's more than understandable that he is the way that he is here. And in spite of the situation being as bad as it is, Buck still pushes through everything to find and regroup with his team, of which he doesn't even know if any of them have survived until the end of his first level. Buck has an intense care for his teammates, something that arguably puts him at a tactical disadvantage later in the game. It's this, among similar attributes, that make him incredibly likable, even more so when he's bouncing off of the other members of Alpha 9. One of my favorite instances of this is when Romeo, a character Buck butts heads with almost every time we see them on screen, is badly wounded, and the first thing Buck does is pick Romeo up and carry him on his shoulders until Romeo's wound can be safely attended to. Which is especially impressive given that in the same mission Romeo and Buck have this back and forth.
Hey Rookie, you out there? Respond, that's an order.
Give it up, Gunny. Even if he ain't dead, he's lost in that soup. Our comms can't cut through that.
Oh, give up, huh? What if it were you down there?
Just saying. I ain't dead.
You're a piece of work, Romeo.
This scene goes to show that even if the person he's saving is kind of an asshole, Buck will still do whatever it takes to make sure his team, his friends, are safe. And moments like those are only made better by Nathan Fillion and the rest of the cast's stellar performances. As a quick aside, an interesting thing of note about ODST is that a good chunk of the cast are made up of ex-Firefly actors. I already mentioned Nathan Fillion as Buck, but Alan Tudyk and Adam Baldwin also play Mickey and Dutch respectively. The only exceptions to this rule are Nolan North as Romeo, more well known for his voice acting work like Nathan Drake, and Tricia Helfer as Dare, who's probably most well known for her roles in Battlestar Galactica? How does one person play that many characters? Anyway, they all bring these guys to life, and you can tell through the characters' chemistry that the cast often recorded their lines together. This kind of environment for voice acting, while not necessary for a great performance, can often make a performance better given that the actors can bounce off of each other in real time. It makes the chemistry between the cast feel more realistic and grounded, which in turn helps us better connect with the dialogue and characters. Which wraps us back around to what I was saying about Nathan Fillion as Buck. Out of the entire cast, this is my favorite performance, and that's a very high bar. The energy Nathan Fillion brought to this role is almost addicting to watch. Each and every line Buck has is incredibly investing and charming, even in instances where a real person would be off-putting, like when he's angry. Buck, and hell, really every character, just wouldn't be the same if it weren't for these performances. And it's no wonder Buck comes back as a main character in Halo 5 with how much he's loved by both the community, Bungie, and 343i alike. He's not written well in Halo 5, but that's a discussion for another day. An interesting thing of note about Buck is that we don't actually see him interact with most of the cast besides Dare, Romeo, and Rookie all that much. And when he does interact with Dutch or Mickey, they're usually pretty small interactions that don't tell the viewer a lot about how these characters regard each other. Which is a bit of a shame, but still there's enough from just Buck himself to infer that there's a mutual respect between him and everyone in Alpha 9 at least. And when it comes to the only main character that's not a member of Alpha 9, there's clearly a lot more than just mutual respect between Buck and Dare. Dare doesn't have as much screen time as the rest of the cast, and is unfortunately the only main character you never get to play as, but her presence is still felt throughout, mostly in the endgame, and especially with her relationship with Buck. These two have something going on between them, romance, resentment, a mix of both even. Watching these two together is as frustrating as it is captivating, and when they finally get that kiss near the end, it's rewarding as a viewer. It's also a bit awkward, kinda like watching your parents make out. See, these two get what I mean. Sorta related, there's this little moment with Dare right near the end of the game where she opens a door and is clearly a bit disappointed that it's the Rookie on the other side and not Buck. I wanted to point this moment out mostly just because I think it's a fantastic yet subtle character moment that I haven't seen many people talk about, surprisingly. It's pretty obvious by this moment and others that, even though the relationship is strained and she's not very open about her feelings, Dare cares a lot about Buck. And those bits of characterization are helped by the fact that Dare isn't just Buck's love interest. She's her own person with her own motivation. That motivation being relatively sketchy, to be fair, at least until it's revealed what it actually is. That's another thing I really like about Dare. She comes off kind of shady, for lack of a better word. So, Alpha 9 were originally sent to board a straggling Covenant carrier and clean it out, but that changed when Dare was sent in to take over and find this guy, Virgil. Things don't go as planned though when that aforementioned Covenant carrier jumps into slipspace and scatters the entire team. Though, even before things went bad, Dare never updates any of the members of Alpha 9, barring Buck, on what the mission actually is, leaving almost all of them under the assumption that they're still going for the carrier. And even with Buck knowing that the operation had changed, he doesn't know the specifics, i.e. Virgil, until near the very end of the game. This refusal to be open and trusting of others both professionally and emotionally is what leads to that shady vibe Dare gives off, as well as being a big part of why Dare is so interesting as a character to me. That, combined with her altruism, a trait that's kind of at odds with her somewhat standoffish personality. These things make Dare a flawed, somewhat difficult but endearing personality to follow, and it makes me wish we had not only gotten to see more of her in general, but also gotten to play as her as well. I just imagine being able to experience her side of the story, after she manages to break free from her drop pod all the way to when she makes it to the data center and sets out to rescue Virgil with the Rookie. I can't help but feel that Dare's story not being playable, let alone not being seen that much, was maybe a missed opportunity. This is probably the only real problem I have with the game either, come to think of it. To go back a second, let's talk about Virgil a little bit. He's that floating tentacle guy I've shown off a couple of times. Now, I'm not giving Virgil his own section, kind of, don't worry about that for now. I more so wanted to bring this guy up here because I think he shows off one of my favorite traits of Dare's exceptionally well. Dare, in spite of being somewhat closed off and being a hardened soldier, has a lot of care for the innocent, whether human or otherwise. Being fair, Dare doesn't just save Virgil for his sake. She's saving him because he's also an important asset to the survival of humanity. But you can tell Dare still wants this guy to live for more than just her own people's sake. She feels a lot of sympathy for Virgil and what the Covenant have been doing to his species. Not to mention, even with her more stern exterior, a trait she shares with Buck, she's probably the nicest character out of everyone, except for maybe Dutch. She's tough but with a heart of gold, you know? A trope that's tried and true, and I think executed very well here. And on the topic of tropes, I guess that brings us to Dutch, Mickey, and Romeo. I'm jamming these three together given that while I still find them very enjoyable, they don't exactly have much depth in comparison to Buck or Dare, and I just have less to say about them individually. As I alluded to a second ago, these three can feel more like character traits than fully fleshed out characters at times. And you know, that being the case isn't necessarily a bad thing. Not every main character in a work needs to be so intensely fleshed out. Sometimes they only need to serve the purpose they were designed for, whether that be to push the story in the direction it needs to go, or maybe even just for comic relief, for instance. And that's not all Dutch, Mickey, and Romeo have going for them either. There is more substance to them, for the most part. But even if it were, it wouldn't detract from ODST's overall quality, I'd say. To get more into specifics, let's start with Dutch. Dutch comes off as the gruff, older guy of the group. He's not actually the oldest, but that's just the trope he embodies best, I feel. The thing that makes him a little more interesting, though, is that he seems to have a softer side. Sort of like Dare, just more openly and in a different direction. Let's take these two scenes at the beginning of the game, for instance.
The Navy put up a good fight.
Of course they did. It's Earth.
Better late than never.
How about you show some respect, Romeo?
Wake up, Buttercup.
Relax, Rookie. He don't mean nothing. Besides, now's one of those times. Pays to be the strong, silent type.
They're small moments, but they give a surprising amount of insight into Dutch as a character without anything much actually being said. He's kind, friendly, and respectful in spite of his seemingly grumpy appearance. Not to mention being put in a situation where it'd be more than understandable if he fit his outward appearance. He also seems to take a liking to Mickey, although that point might just be me reading too much into things given that, besides some smaller moments, Mickey is the only character Dutch really interacts with, period. Though my point is helped a little bit by the fact that they share some pretty good chemistry together. Dutch being the older, more experienced soldier, v Mickey being essentially the opposite, leads to some pretty good banter between these two.
Well, guess it's just you and me.
My vote, hole up, wait for backup.
Thank God! Does one of you know how to use explosives?
Your vote just got overruled.
Oh.
And since we're already talking about him, let's dive a little deeper into Mickey. Like I just said, in some ways he's the opposite of Dutch, more so just in his age and experience really. Funnily enough, Mickey's actually younger and has a lower rank than the rookie. This inexperience is best exemplified by various moments where Mickey comes off as either nervous, buffoonish, or childish, sometimes all at the same time.
Hey, where's the fight at?
Take a guess, genius.
Son of a gun!
Get your ass out of the street!
Wait for me!
Unfortunately, Mickey, out of not only these three, but just the entire cast, is the character I have the least to say about. Mickey is clearly the main comic relief of ODST, and like I said earlier, I don't think that's a bad thing. Not to mention, I'd still say Mickey has some depth, it's just a bit more shallow than the other characters. That lack of depth is helped out by the fact that Mickey bounces off the other cast members well, is actually funny, and that his witticisms don't go too deep into Joss Whedon tier. He's used effectively and is kept likable, which is all you really need for a character like this. If you want to talk unlikable though, then we gotta move on to Romeo. Romeo, unlike Mickey, is the character in this section that I'm gonna have the most to say about. From his very first line, complaining about the Navy not doing a better job, Romeo comes off as a bit of a nihilist, or at the very least, a pessimist. This makes him really interesting in contrast to the rest of Alpha 9, given that everyone else is clearly more optimistic about not only the war, but once they're split up, the current situation they find themselves in. As I've shown numerous times by now, Romeo just doesn't buy it. He's all doom and gloom and pretty much only looking out for himself, which I find really fascinating when you think about his words versus his actions. Romeo is the one who seeks out Buck at the beginning of the game, not the other way around. While he complains at about every turn, he still sticks with Buck and later the rest of Alpha 9 until everything is said and done. He could easily have left whenever he wanted, it's not like there isn't an overabundance of functional transport, military or civilian, all throughout the city still. And you could argue that this is just him following orders, sure, but I think it's more likely that Romeo is all bark but no bite, and that deep down he cares about the others more than he lets on. That moment with him and Buck talking about the rookie is maybe a bit of a dent in that theory, but I think that's just Romeo being, well, himself, more than him actually not explicitly caring about whether the rookie is okay or not. We all have different ways of coping in intense situations, and I like to think that this is what Romeo is doing when he says things like this. That part is also made kind of funny in hindsight at the end of the game when Buck tells the rookie to tend to Romeo's wounds just for the rookie to do it, no questions asked. And on that note, let's talk about the rookie. Despite Buck being for all intents and purposes the actual main character of ODST, the rookie is the character you play as the most, and he's also remained my favorite ever since my first playthrough. That might be shocking to hear given that I assume most people treat Rookie as nothing more than a self-insert, and to some extent he is expected to be projected onto by the player, being a silent protagonist and all. But the thing that draws me to the Rookie over any other character, the thing that makes me feel like he's more than just a self-insert, is that he's still so human. It's not like the other characters don't feel human either, of course, it's just more noticeable with Rookie for various reasons, the biggest being that he just doesn't talk. It's his actions that have to speak for him, which in turn makes him come off as not necessarily more relatable than the other characters, but relatable in a different way that I just connect to more. One of my favorite examples of this is this cutscene right here where he's trying to bend Romeo's sniper rifle back into the right shape. And wouldn't you try to do that too? Maybe you wouldn't, but I know I would at least, even knowing that it's a piece of rigid hard metal that's definitely not going to budge that easily. This thing is broken, and it needs to be fixed, and while I can't fix it, I still feel the need to try for whatever reason. This is one of many instances of Rookie doing this kind of thing, and I can't help but be captivated by it. These little things add up, and they make Rookie more of a character than I think people are willing to give him credit for. That aforementioned human feeling is also helped by the fact that Rookie feels like he's at a significant disadvantage when you're playing as him. To go on a semi-related tangent for a second, trust me, this is important, there's a bit of rhetoric that surrounds ODST that's always bothered me. So often in relation to this game, I've seen and heard people say that playing as an ODST just feels like playing as a weaker Spartan. I don't know who started this or how this became a talking point, but I have to wonder if the people who think this have actually played ODST. To be generous, ODST does play very similarly to Halo 3 in some aspects. I mean, obviously it's going to since it uses the same visuals, game engine, and sandbox. But to say that playing as an ODST feels like playing as a more delicate Spartan, that just doesn't sit right with me. And you know who agrees? Bungie.
What's fun about being an ODST? How's he different than the Master Chief? What kind of problems does he face versus the Chief?
If they're not the walking tank, they really have to pick up weapons that they're going to use.
When you combine those things that we took away with things that we added, such as the visor, even though you might feel a bit more vulnerable, you have the right tools for the job. If you look at the Master Chief in the course of the Halo games, he became ridiculously powerful over time.
And ODST feels very different because when you start taking fire, you can't just continually keep kicking ass. You have to actually look for cover because you don't have a motion tracker like the Chief.
For us, health is important in the ODST's world because it reminds you that you're vulnerable.
As you just heard, a lot of the changes to how this game plays in comparison to Halo 3 were to differentiate ODST from Spartans, most specifically in reminding the player that all things considered, you are just a normal human, especially if we're talking about playing these games on heroic difficulty or higher. On those difficulties, when playing as Master Chief, I feel like I can still get away with a lot more than I can as an ODST, and when playing as the Rookie specifically, not only do I feel like I'm not a Spartan while playing as him, I feel like I'm barely even keeping up with his fellow teammates. When playing as Buck, Dutch, Mickey, or Romeo, you're given more ammo, stronger weapons, and have more freedom to engage with enemy encounters. You aren't going to have the chance to be as liberal as a Spartan in combat, but you still have some wiggle room at least. Whereas when playing as the Rookie, your ammo and weapons are limited to the little you can find by scrounging around. This in turn means needing to pick and choose your battles wisely, or else you might end up in a fight later with tools that don't fit the situation well. Sometimes taking the stealthy approach, or just straight up running away, are the better choices. Even the optional weapon caches you can find around the city, while somewhat helpful, don't mean you can just waltz into any firefight and come out on top. And I don't know if it was intentional, but all this helps to make Rookie feel more inexperienced than the rest of his team, more than Mickey even, which is fitting given his name, I suppose. Despite that inexperience, despite everything he goes through, the Rookie continues to search for his missing team. He continues to persevere. And what's more human than that? I'd be remiss to not bring up the biggest part of why playing as the Rookie feels so different too. New Mombasa. You see, unlike the sections where you play as Buck and the others, which are what you'd expect from a standard Halo mission, Rookie sections are open world and non-linear. To an extent. This isn't Red Dead Redemption. ODST guides the player in a pretty linear fashion that you don't necessarily need to follow, but still. On top of that, the game's map is very compact in comparison to other open world games, and I think that's to its benefit. Keeping things on the smaller scale not only helps the experience feel more focused, but also allows the people doing environment work to have better detailing, which in turn makes everything more immersive and engaging. And there's no better example of that philosophy in action to me than New Mombasa. This city was once clearly brimming with life, but is now just holding on by a thread. Every small little piece of rubble, graffiti, or whatever else you can find exists to remind you of that. These things make New Mombasa feel almost like a character in itself, and in a more literal way, it kind of is. But before we get to that, I have a question for you. What if the phones rang? This question was asked by game director Joseph Staten and is what led to one of my absolute favorite parts of ODST. Throughout the city of New Mombasa, you can find various payphones, ATMs, medical stations, and other things like them that you can interact with. When you do, you get a small section of a larger audio drama. This entire part of the game has always stood out to me since no other Bungie-era Halo really does anything like it. Some of the 343i-era games do, most notably Infinite, but I don't think they come close to hitting the same mark as when ODST did it. There's something about the slow build-up of this storyline that you have to piece together one bit at a time that makes it more engaging to me. It's helped by the fact that the storyline itself is very well written. It's a simple story about a teenage girl named Sadie Andesha running away to join the military against her father's wishes, and while she's doing so, the Covenant attack New Mombasa. Now, I could go into the full story of this audio drama, but I don't think I could do it justice. I also think that if you've never experienced this part of ODST before, you should, and you should do it as blind as possible. That said, there are a few other things I want to bring up about this that are spoilers for the aptly named Sadie's story, so if I've piqued your interest here, either give it a listen, it is only less than an hour long, or skip to this timestamp. So, I keep referring to this guy as Virgil, right? Well, that's not technically correct. First though, we need to talk about the Superintendent, an AI that basically runs all of New Mombasa. More specifically, let's talk about a subroutine of the Superintendent, created by Sadie's father, called Virgil. Virgil was created to be a simple program that acts as an overprotective pet for Sadie. It has maybe some level of sentience, but being part of a dumb AI, smart and dumb AI being a topic I'll get into if, and more likely when, I get to talking about the mainline Halo series, Virgil is very limited in what he can do and say. That is, until the superintendent merges with this guy, who would then become known as Virgil, and also just sort of becomes Virgil. I purposely not brought it up until now, but these things, Huragok, also known as engineers, are, well, living supercomputers pretty much. They can transfer any data from any computer into themselves and become one with that computer. This is why I said earlier that New Mombasa is almost literally a character in itself, and it's so interesting to me that you would know almost none of this if you just stuck to ODST's main story. You don't need to know any of this for the story to work either. This is one of the many reasons why Sadie's story is so cool to me, because it doesn't take away from the main plotline and only adds to it. One of my favorite examples of this comes at the very end of the game. So, in the rookie's final mission, you run into this police officer, who on a normal playthrough isn't really worth thinking about outside of how strangely Virgil acts around him. When I was younger and never bothered with doing the audio drama stuff, I always wondered why Virgil seemed to have it out for this guy. Of course, after listening to it all, I completely understood. This police officer is corrupt and helped to kill Sadie's father by freezing him to death with the superintendent's cooling system. It's why this final area is frozen over too, something else I had always wondered about when I was younger. And cooler still is that what happens to this police officer changes depending on whether you've collected all of the intel for Sadie's story or not up to that point. On a playthrough where you don't bother, Virgil will cut off this cop's exit and he'll be seemingly killed by drones. But if you did bother, you'll be given the opportunity to follow this guy as he goes to do something. It's here you discover the final audio log and Sadie's dead father. After this, the cop picks a fight with you and meets his deserved end. Something like Sadie's story being in a game like this is so unnecessary, but I'm forever grateful that it was included anyway. It makes ODST, New Mombasa specifically, feel so alive. All of the things I've discussed in this section remind me that New Mombasa has always been one of my favorite locations I've ever experienced in a game. Well, all of that, and my favorite part of ODST, the atmosphere. If this were all there was to ODST, this impeccable ambience and mood, I think it would still be one of my favorite games of all time. The darkness of night covering the entire city, with only small bits of light peeking out from street lamps and other such sources, or the raging fires slowly eating away at the city's rooftops, or, good God, the constant rain. New Mombasa is both melancholic and oppressive with its atmosphere, and yet also still and calming at the same time. It gives me this strange nostalgic feeling for somewhere, sometime that I've never been. And while ODST would still be fantastic with just these elements contributing to the way it feels to be in this part of the Halo world, it's brought a step above by its amazing soundtrack. I think it'd be more apt to show this point rather than try to explain it with words, so here's a clip of ODST with none of the game's music. And here's that same clip with the game's music over top. This might catch me some flack, but ODST's soundtrack is my favorite in the entire series, no contest. It's so different from the rest of the Halo games too. It's not trying to be grandiose or epic, which works really well for those games, don't get me wrong, but in contrast, ODST's slow sax and piano-filled tracks help to make this part of the Halo universe, and more importantly the player, feel small. For a lot of the game, you're isolated and left to whatever you have around you to escape the city turned war zone, with towering skyscrapers and gigantic beasts hovering over you the entire time. And that feeling of being small is so intrinsically human too. You don't get that from the games where you play as Chief, although I'd say him and those games are still very human in their own right, just in a different way. But ODST manages to capture a more relatable human experience, having a wider cast of characters that are all deeply flawed, some more than others, on top of being set in a location that's not a cool giant ring world, but instead a simple urban center that any person can see and relate to. I've alluded to this a couple of times, most obviously when talking about the Rookie, but the thing that made ODST stick with me all these years is the way it expresses its humanity. Despite the setting being depressing, and despite the characters being understandably upset at the situation they're in, ODST still has an air of optimism surrounding it that I just adore. All of the characters still crack jokes with each other and compliment each other for a job well done, and in the end they not only escape together but also with a newfound hope for humankind. After everything, the sun still rises in the morning, and man, it was a hell of a night.